Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Allegra, have you ordered anything from Shein? And you said, I imagine the answer is God, no.
Yeah, right. Imagine it's like, no, I have a guilty Shein secret.
That'll be in the Daily Mail, like
Yeah,
former
absolutely.
cop
Yeah,
leader.
absolutely, yeah.
Welcome to the City of London.
The City of London.
The next station is Bank. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
The financial heart of the country.
The City.
The City.
Welcome to In the City.
Stand clear of the doors, please.
Hi, everyone. Good to have you back for another week of In the City, where we unpack the stories dominating the conversations of policymakers and power brokers the world over. I'm Francine Lacqua.
And I'm Allegra Stratton.
Allegra, have you ever ordered anything from the Chinese fast fashion giant Shein?
1000% no.
I'm unsurprised, actually.
Why?
But they're...
Now I'm upset that you're unsurprised. But no, clearly. So I came across it, obviously, in the work we do on sustainability, because it has a very bad environmental impact. I think the algorithm is very interesting. So the idea that they can see really quickly what's popular and then they make more of those. So I think that is fascinating and obviously innovative, but it's being used to the wrong ends.
So it's an interesting story because on the one hand, if the listing does go ahead, then it has a possible valuation of £50 billion. So it'd be big enough to quiet some of the doomsday chatter around the UK IPO market. But then, as you say, there's ethical questions.
Yes, and in very, very recently, a couple of years ago, the City of London was talking a lot about being the global centre of green finance. So what does that mean? Well, it means a number of things, but included in it is that we have regulations that are supposed to get companies to demonstrate their transitioning away from carbon-intensive activities, which is, I think, would be a stretch for Shein. A stretch for Shein to demonstrate.
Yeah, we're not sure how to pronounce it also. In today's episode...
Shein. It's Shein from now on.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about what it means for London now that it's inching closer to a listing. With us, opinion columnist Andrea Felsted, who definitely knows how to pronounce it. She oversees consumer goods and the retail industry, and Ailbhe Rhea, reporter and Readout newsletter writer as well. So thank you both for joining us. Andrea, talk to us about Shein. Like, how many clothes do they sell and make?
They had sales last year of $23 billion. And they said they want to increase that to $60 billion by 2025. So that, that would be $60 billion would be ahead of Inditex, which is, the world's biggest sort of clothing retailer. So, it is very sizable.
Inditex is Zara and so on, isn't it?
Zara, Massimo Dutti, yes, exactly. So it is very sizable. It's not like a conventional retailer. It doesn't have shops. It doesn't have, warehouses here, and it picks things out. It sees what people are wearing on social media. It pumps them through its algorithm, its system, and that goes to 5,000 suppliers in China. And then they ships things from China direct to consumers in the US and UK. So I think the first question for investors is, what exactly are you being asked to buy shares in this IPO?
But Andrea, I'm on the website. So first of all, who buys from Shein, right? And I see, they're telling me I can get a Shein vacation women's flower ensemble for £3.49. How's it possible to make anything for £3.49?
And then to ship it.
Well, they claim that their system is very efficient, and what will happen, they will only make 100 to 200 pieces of any item, and then if it proves popular, lots of people like that flower ensemble, then they will decide to make more. And they claim that is very efficient, and that's the way they can keep prices down. Now, British retailers have another view, because these items, which are, typically, as you've just mentioned, very cheap, they come direct from China. If they're under £135 each, they're all in small packages. If each one is under £135, it doesn't pay tax on that order. So that immediately it doesn't attract tax, so that immediately makes things cheaper. Now, all retailers make the majority of their product now in Asia. Might not necessarily China, lots have moved out of China, but they will bring those over in containers to UK distribution centres, and then they will, get them out to consumers' homes or to their stores. So that they want that cracked down on because, they're saying that does make things cheaper.
Ailbhe, it's difficult for an incoming Labour government, isn't it? Where on one hand, well, not on the one hand, you have a huge part of that party is interested in environmental protections and standards. Another part of it, overlapping but slightly different, is interested in workers' rights. But then there's that central core, interested in all those things too, but they're wanting to demonstrate that the City of London is going to be back on its feet very quickly. So it's a bit of a headache for them.
A bit, yeah. We have reported, or I reported with colleagues, that Labour is not going to block this, that they've had various meetings with Shein, first in Davos, more in London, arranged by the London Stock Exchange, and they basically gave them assurances that they're not going to block it. So they have made their decision. The headline is that they are open to this because it's a big listing, but they are careful to add a certain number of caveats, I suppose. So you mentioned the sort of the concern over workers' rights. I mean, some particularly concerning stories about basically slave labour in Xinjiang, which Shein has denied. Labour is saying that the benefit of Shein listing here would be that Shein would then be subject to UK employment regulations. And so it's actually better to have a company like that being brought under UK regulation. And they want even more places listing in the UK so they can regulate them in line with British law, essentially. I'm not really sure if that will wash with parts of the Labour Party. I mean, you mentioned the concern about environmental standards, which is a big concern with Shein and fast fashion, but it's also, it's called the Labour Party. It's the it's the party of organised labour, of workers. That the clue is in the name. Angela Rayner is making a big part of her sort of mission as Deputy Prime Minister, shoring up workers' rights. There are loads of concerns about that, but there's also, I think, the more complicated thing about their securonomics offer. So they basically have made this pitch that their economic model will be one that shores up UK security at home. So not having to outsource things like energy to foreign powers, but then also just sort of protecting bits of British industry from Chinese influence. And so Shein, it was sort of originated in China. It's now based out of Shanghai, but this is sort of essentially putting a big Chinese company on the London Stock Exchange. So there are concerns there as well.
But Ailbhe, I mean, I feel like it's difficult to regulate, right? I mean, if they don't have their employees here, if the supply chains are here, I don't see how any regulator, based in the UK would be able to give workers' rights to someone based abroad. And the SEC also said that it wasn't too keen to have them on because of some of these concerns.
But also think of the business model, right? The reason why that fetching, whatever that number is you're looking online and probably going to buy, is £3.40.
With the flower ensemble.
As soon as you start to regulate, then you're going to push up the cost of various different bits of their model. So you're going to break the way that they make money.
But I wonder whether the Labour Party feel like they're so much under pressure because they want to show that they're business friendly almost at any cost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you say, the minute you start probing that line, you think, how does that really work? You're not necessarily going to be based in the UK, you're just listing here. But that's kind of their argument that they have to make, really, to keep parts of the party happy. But they've clearly just made this calculation that they don't want a big headline, Labour blocks the possible biggest listing ever in London, on the London Stock Exchange, that they just want to be seen to be pro-business, pro-growth. So much of actually what they want to do in government is reliant on private sector investment because they don't feel like they have much money themselves. So many of their models are sort of government puts in £1 hoping that you get £4 from the private sector. So they are really reliant on just vibes and that message to the private sector, hoping that they can make up the difference where they're not investing, the private sector can. And they're putting that basically above all those other concerns.
Andrea, you wrote that London needs to be careful it doesn't become the sloppy seconds to New York. Does it actually, I mean, you're right instinctively, but does it actually matter? There are commentators out there that we don't read as much as we read you, Andrea, but that they are saying, London needs to be careful about Ailbhe's point about vibes. It needs to be careful about the sort of ID it's presenting to the world by being the place that is happy to have this listing.
I totally agree. I think that is the bigger danger. Whenever you look at this, there is risk with this company. And to say that, we want something that is this risky, I don't think sends a great message. That said, everything's got a price. So what you've got with Shein is you've got these risks, but you've also got a high valuation. We don't have all the numbers. I had to make a lot of assumptions to figure out what it was worth. But I got to basically a similar rating to Inditex. And when you think, Inditex is, the biggest clothing retailer, it's earned its track record for many years. It's doing phenomenally well, Zara. And you've got Shein, which, as we've discussed, has all these issues, is coming in at the same valuation. Okay, so if London wants it, it's got to be priced to the fact that makes investors comfortable with the risk.
I just one more from me, but it's probably a bit niche. Inditex is interesting because with Zara, you can actually see their price point it's not as low as Shein, but it is not extortionate either. But what you're seeing is they're putting some of their money, not enough for some campaigners, but some of their money into innovation to bring in the fabrics that are lower impact on the environment. So, there are actually these models out there. The debate is, can you actually have environmental fast fashion? Like, is it an oxymoron? Yes.
Exactly. But they're all trying, not just Inditex. I mean, H&M really has been doing a lot on this for years. It's put, sustainability at the heart of its business model. Even Primark, we think Primark's very fast fashion. They're doing a lot with recycled fabrics, and they're all. It's
possible,
all really
basically.
Trying. It's possible. I mean, you're never going to get a zero impact from fast fashion, but the more you can get people to just wear things more, can minimize the impact. And let's forget, even luxury isn't risk-free. A lot of luxury, you've got things with like the leather, the metal cloth,
the cashmere.
So all of these things have an environmental impact.
I think the big caveat on all of this is that even though I've said Labour has given Shein reassurances that they won't block this, they caveat that with saying that they haven't done their full due diligence yet. And so even though Shein has sort of begun the process of listing in London, we know that won't happen until the end of the summer, which means that even though we're in a general election campaign, Parliament will be back before this can happen. And there are Labour backbenchers, people like Liam Byrne, who have concerns about this, and who do want to have parliamentary scrutiny of Shein before it can list in London. So I don't think that this is a done deal by any means. We can see the direction of travel from the Labour government in terms of them just wanting this big listing. But what will happen when all the MPs... Closing it down
as an election issue, maybe, Ailbhe.
Maybe.
Jeremy Hunt's up for it.
But the thing is that we don't know how bad, for lack of a better term, Shein actually is, right? I mean, Primark is maybe the closest we could compare it to. I mean, they went through like factory collapses. Like, this is not only not environmentally friendly. This is, we could look at child labor. Do we have any of those facts of how it actually operates, or is that what Labour is waiting for?
Well, definitely they would say that they've had a lot of questions in their meetings with Shein, but it's interesting that they have mentioned a lot of the lines that I heard from Andrea there, that pitch that they're actually not as environmentally bad as they say they are, because they aren't making all those clothes right away. They're seeing which ones perform well. They commission a lot,
so make
it small. Yeah, exactly. And so they've been kind of making that pitch to Labour. Labour sounds kind of persuaded by it, and maybe because they're hearing what they want to hear. But definitely there is that big caveat. They haven't done their full due diligence. There have been some very concerning stories about Shein in multiple directions. So I don't think that this is a done deal, and I especially think the Conservatives, if they are in opposition, there's so much sort of China skepticism. We saw what happened over Huawei. I think you could really see this crystallising as a sort of early issue under the next government.
Nigel Farage is against it.
But this is also, it comes on the back of, maybe in the last 10 to 15 years, loads of listings from Russia. I mean, we had all the metals, right, companies being listed here, and that then went on to backfire.
So this is the thing, Fran. I mean, if you were to marshal a defence, you would say that many companies listed in London have not fantastic environmental standards, and we're we have, as you say, mining, we have lots of oil and gas and so on. What against that is actually a lot of the regulations that have come in the last couple of years have expected and put expectations on them to do transition plans and to be demonstrating that they have mapped and understand their carbon emissions.
But I think, and I would argue, and Andrea probably is best placed to answer this, that you can have, a company that pollutes because of fossil fuel, which is maybe different to child labor, which we don't know if that's happening, Andrea, but how difficult is it on such a large, if they're valued at 50 billion or thereabouts, this is a massive company. Supply chains are probably all over the world. A lot of them are in China. So how difficult is it to have that due diligence, to understand where they do them?
One way to maybe think about that is they talk about 5,000 suppliers. A high street retailer in the UK would have hundreds of suppliers. So immediately you've got a bigger supplier. Now, Shein say that last year they audited 95% of their suppliers and only a very small amount were found to not be compliant, and they stopped working with those. So that's all very good. But I think it's just the scale, that thousands, hundreds. So if you've got a high street retail with hundreds of suppliers, they will have like a lot of auditors on the ground. So for 5,000 suppliers, you need even more auditors on the ground. So I think Shein's got to come out and show what it's doing in its supply chain, show that how it's auditing, how often it's auditing, how many auditors it's got, what they find, and what they do if they find something they don't like, and how they're getting rid of it. I think it's really got to explain that, in great detail. And it will, if it lists, it will have a prospectus, and it's really got to set that out as much as it can.
You're right, Andrea. That's what's going to be. So if we get a Labour government, and it's a Labour government that says it puts impact on the environment front and centre, they made a great deal of this in their prospectus so far. It will be interesting to see in reality what that means, how much you're actually going to get, rather than an assertion, don't worry, we checked 95% of our suppliers and we kicked the ones out that we didn't like. They're actually going to have to demonstrate that. They're going to have to demonstrate that they've carbon mapped every bit of their business. They're going to have to demonstrate Ailbhe's point in numbers rather than in assertions that actually, because they don't waste so much, they're lower carbon in that way. These do sound like, benign practices, but they'll have to show that rather than assert it. And that will be such an interesting, test in detail of the Labour government's commitment to the environment and climate.
Ailbhe, if for ethical reasons Labour says no, do they have enough support from the business community to be able to still show that they're business friendly and able to attract capital to the UK?
Oh, it's hard to know. I get the impression that business leaders are quite impressed by Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. She's done a lot of work to, have lots and lots of business breakfasts around here in the city for the past few years. Jonathan Reynolds as well, the Shadow Business Secretary, the person who has been meeting with Shein, he's done a lot of work on that. But I get the impression from speaking to colleagues who speak to business leaders all the time that they're less sure about Angela Rayner. That we were talking about vibes, that she has a different vibe in terms of her relationship, her sort of image towards business. And she's the person, of course, the sort of figurehead of their workers' rights reforms. And so I think that it would be interesting. This is just one example of where all these tensions that we said, workers' rights, the environment, but then being pro-business, I think might come to a head in government. We've seen it on that so-called New Deal for working people, their workers' rights reforms. Different people in the shadow cabinet take a different view on that. Some people have been pushing for that business consultation. Other people don't want it. I don't think Shein has been discussed by everyone in the shadow cabinet. We haven't necessarily seen Ed Miliband and Angela Rayner weigh in with a view yet. That could happen in government.
So given our understanding of how this Labour Party works, who would make the ultimate decision on whether the IPO goes ahead?
Well, interestingly, it should be Keir Starmer, and he's unpredictable in this way. On a lot, you would expect the pro-business side to win. So that'd be Rachel Reeves, Jonathan Reynolds. They should win out, but they aren't winning on everything. On things like workers' rights, Angela Rayner has been winning on those arguments. We've seen it in recent weeks. So I don't think it's as clear cut, and that's actually, the bigger fascination if we do get a Labour government. Keir Starmer will call the shots, and we don't know exactly what to expect from him. Sometimes we think we know, and then he sides with other people in his party.
Doesn't it also depend on where they're at in the cycle and what they've just been beaten up for? I mean, if I think about when they ditched the 28 billion climate pledge for low carbon tech, that they would invest 28 billion, and then quite soon after they were being quite protective of the workers' rights program, because I think you're trying to kind of placate different parts of the party at any given time, aren't you?
Yeah, and also I think it depends on whether it's actually about money or not. Like they are quite clear. Like, so the 28 billion, if they want no uncosted manifesto commitments, then they feel like they have to ditch that. But on other things where money is not so involved, they feel like they can be more radical, and that's where Keir Starmer tends to come down.
So Ailbhe, what kind of timeline are we looking at for Shein? What happens next?
We're looking post-election. We're looking at what happens when Parliament comes back, what kind of scrutiny they instigate of Shein, and then when they plan to sell their shares towards the end of the summer, if they manage to get to that point.
Ailbhe, Andrea, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to This Week's in the City from Bloomberg. This episode was hosted by me, Francine Lacqua, and Allegra Stratton. It was produced by Summer Sadi, production support and sound design by Moses Andam. Brendan Francis Newman is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is head of podcast. Special thanks to Andrea Felsted and Ailbhe Rhea. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts.